What if I told you the pain you felt wasn't punishment, it was proof of your power? They didn't break you, they revealed themselves. And that's where your real freedom began. You gave love like a lighthouse in a storm and they tried to steal your light, but you rose anyway. They didn't deserve you, but you gave anyway, fully, freely, without reservation. You gave your kindness like a gift, your loyalty like a promise, your time like it was endless. And all of it was handed to people who only knew how to take, never to reciprocate. You hoped that your goodness might awaken theirs. You thought that if you just loved harder, maybe it would repair what they refused to fix. But all it did was teach them how to hurt you without fearing the consequences. And here comes the most painful truth, one that stings deeper than betrayal itself. You were never punished for being a good person. You were punished for offering your goodness to the wrong people. But listen closely, because this isn't the story of someone broken. This is the beginning of an awakening. The moment you stopped begging for closure. The moment you chose silence over retaliation. The moment you walked away without looking back. That was the moment you won. They expected you to collapse. They expected you to stay stuck, waiting for apologies they were never planning to give. But you surprised them. From the silence they created, you rose not with bitterness, but with emotional intelligence. Not with revenge, but with spiritual discipline. You built a kind of self-worth that no betrayal can ever reach. This isn't about hating them. This is about finally seeing them clearly. And today, we're going to uncover the part no one talks about. What really happens when the good-hearted person stops returning and never looks back. Because you weren't blind. You saw the red flags, the subtle manipulation, the inconsistent effort, the way they vanished until they needed something from you. You saw it, you felt it, but you stayed because your heart doesn't know how to calculate love like a transaction. You give because that's who you are, and that's what they never understood. They thought your silence meant you didn't. Notice, they mistook your patience for weakness. They assumed that your forgiveness would come on demand, that no matter how many times they crossed the line, you'd just draw another one further back. But here's the brutal truth, they were wrong. You gave them emotional gold, and they treated it like scrap metal. You offered loyalty to people who couldn't even spell the word. You were a safe harbor to someone who only came to your shore, to take, not to stay. That's the burden of emotionally intelligent people. You see deeper. You hear what they don't say. You recognize the hurt behind the hate. You believe that if you just love them better, they'll finally become better. But love doesn't fix people who are committed to staying broken. Let's make one thing clear. The problem isn't your giving. The real danger is giving to those who use your heart as a weapon against you. You gave comfort to someone addicted to chaos. You gave peace to someone who fed off conflict. You gave light to someone who lived in darkness and they tried to dim. You, not because you were wrong, but because your brightness exposed everything they tried to hide. And still, you stayed. Because that's what strong people do. They don't give up easily. But eventually, even the strongest heart gets tired of being mishandled, and that's when everything changes. You gave everything until the silence inside you became louder than their excuses. And that's where clarity began. You told yourself stories to soften the truth. Maybe they're just going through something, you whispered. Maybe if I just hang in there a little longer, they'll finally see my worth. But here's the moment of reckoning. They did see your worth. They just had no intention of honoring it. They saw the way your heart stayed open, even when it was hurting. And instead of protecting that tenderness, they weaponized it. They saw how deeply you cared and used that to manipulate your emotions like strings on a puppet. They noticed how easily you forgave and treated it like a hall pass to repeat the same pain again and again. They saw your calm spirit, your spiritual discipline, and mistook it for surrender. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed your strength was weakness. They thought your grace meant compliance. They didn't realize that you weren't being naive, were simply hoping to be wrong about them. But the evidence became too loud to ignore. And when it did, you didn't lash out. You didn't beg for understanding or demand closure. You did the most powerful thing a wounded soul can do. You let go, quietly, completely, and that's what shook them. There's a rare kind of power in walking away without setting fire to the bridge. You didn't curse their name. You didn't expose their cruelty. You simply chose peace. You left with clarity, not chaos. You removed them not just from your phone, but from your spirit, from your future, and now they sit in their own silence, haunted not by guilt, but by contrast. Because for the first time, they've felt what it means to be loved properly. And now, no one else measures up. No one else brings the depth, the softness, the light that you brought effortlessly. You were never too much. You were simply too much for someone incapable of depth. And here's the most stoic truth of all. You don't rise by proving others wrong. You rise by proving yourself right. Right to protect your peace. Right to stand up for your energy. Right to stop giving infinite chances to those who treat your presence like it's disposable. Because they didn't deserve another chance. They never did. There's a special kind of exhaustion, one not caused by long hours or hard work. It's the fatigue that comes from being emotionally bled dry by someone who only knows how to take. They didn't steal your money. They didn't touch your possessions, but they drained something far more precious. Your time, your attention, your peace of mind. They took your emotional availability for granted. They treated your open heart like it came with no limits, no boundaries. They assumed that because you gave freely, they had the right to take endlessly at first. You thought you were being loving, supportive, compassionate. You told yourself that giving them more time, more understanding, more second chances, that was kindness. But eventually, you started to notice the pattern. When you were hurting, they weren't there. When you set boundaries, they pushed harder. When you chose silence, they grew louder. And when you finally asked for balance, they labeled you difficult. That's what narcissistic or toxic individuals do. They don't ask. They assume. They don't need your permission. They feel entitled to your soul. To them, your presence wasn't a blessing. It was a possession. And the moment you started pulling a weight, trying to reclaim even a sliver of your peace, they called you selfish. But ask yourself, what kind of person gets angry when you stop letting yourself be drained? The answer is clear. Someone who never loved you. Someone who only loved how useful you made them feel. They loved the spotlight you gave them. They loved having someone to lean on, to manipulate, to blame. But they never once asked how you were holding up. They never saw how empty you were becoming. Because their thirst always came first. And slowly, without realizing it, you began to shrink. Your light dimmed. Your spark faded. Not because you lacked passion, but because you were too busy filling up someone else's emptiness. That's the hidden cost of unguarded empathy. When you love without boundaries, it turns into self-abandonment. But here's the part they didn't expect. Even the most giving soul eventually runs out. And so, without making a scene, You stopped texting first. You stopped checking in. You stopped apologizing for things you didn't do. You had already stopped reaching out, stopped apologizing, stopped giving pieces of yourself to someone who never truly showed up for you. And in that quiet decision, something powerful happened. The spell broke. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. People who only know how to take will always call your healing selfish. Those who manipulate your kindness will always label your boundaries as cold. And those who feed off control will twist your distance into disrespect. But don't let their distorted narrative trap you. You are not the villain in the story they created. You are the survivor of a one-sided dynamic one that demanded endlessly and gave you breadcrumbs in return. You were the one who finally said, enough. No more emotional debt. No more making yourself small just to keep the peace. No more silencing your needs for the sake of a connection that was already starving you. And yes, it hurt deeply, because walking away from someone you once loved, even when they've drained the life from you, is one of the hardest things a soul can do. But it was necessary. Your emotional strength wasn't forged in staying. It was born the moment you chose peace over guilt. The moment you walked away without needing closure. The moment you said no, not out of anger, but from absolute clarity. That is what real spiritual discipline looks like. And now they sit confused. Not because they didn't see this coming, but because they never believed you'd find the strength to stop bleeding for them. They thought you'd always return. They mistook your loyalty for desperation. They thought your kindness meant you'd never walk away. But here's what they never saw coming. The most dangerous moment for a manipulator is when the person they once controlled goes silent. When you stop explaining yourself. When you stop reacting. When you stop justifying. That's when the power shifts. Because now, they're left alone with no one else to drain. No one else to pull into their emotional chaos. And you are finally free. Free to rebuild your life on your terms. Free to reconnect with the version of you that existed before they chipped away at your self-worth. Free to come home to yourself, so don't regret walking away. If there's anything to regret, regret staying long after your soul had already begun whispering, this isn't love. This is survival. They took and took until there was nothing left to give. But now every ounce of energy, time, and love, you're finally giving it back to the one person who always deserved it, yourself. They never believed you'd leave. Not because you were weak, but because you were loyal. They mistook your silence for surrender. They mistook your forgiveness for permission. They thought they had you figured out. They believed, no matter how many times they disrespected you, you would stay. But they were wrong. What they never expected was that the same heart that once gave them everything could one day go cold. Not from bitterness, but from clarity. Because when someone loses a good person, someone loyal, someone patient, someone kind, they don't just lose a companion. They lose a spiritual anchor. They lose the one person who loved them despite the chaos. They lose the mirror that reflected their best self, the same mirror they kept breaking. And that is a loss their ego was never prepared for at first. They pretend it doesn't matter. They act like they let you go. They downplay your absence. They tell others you were too much. They posture, they perform. But silence always grows louder with time. And in that silence, the truth begins to echo. Because no matter how many people they bring in to distract themselves, no matter how much fake confidence they wear like armor, they can't unfeel your absence. What cuts deepest isn't your departure. It's the quiet realization that you were the only one who ever truly stayed. Now they see it in every shallow connection they try to build, in every empty conversation that lacks meaning, in every quiet night when they want to reach out, but know they've lost the privilege to. That ache they feel, that's not heartbreak, that's karma. Because they didn't just lose a partner, they lost someone irreplaceable. They thought you'd fall apart without them, but instead, you're rising in silence, and it's that silence that echoes the loudest. They lost someone who chose to see their potential even when all they showed was destruction. They lost a rare soul one who created safety even in chaos, a sanctuary in human form, and the truth. They will likely never find that again, and that realization haunts them. Because now, every moment of what should feel like peace is pierced by a single, recurring thought. I had something rare, ... and I destroyed it. That's not drama, that's psychology. Because when someone mistreats a person who was good to them, truly deeply good, the mind doesn't just forget. It loops, it replays, it returns to the scene of the crime, not out of sudden wisdom, but because regret is the shadow of mistreatment and pain. Pain is the greatest teacher of all, and while they wrestle with that pain quietly, privately, maybe even denying it, you're not watching, you're not waiting. You've already outgrown the story. Your life is unfolding like a sunrise, bright, steady, unstoppable. Your peace is coming back in waves. Your boundaries are now walls of strength, and your self-worth untouchable. The irony cuts deep. They expected you to unravel, but it's them struggling to breathe in the void you left behind. That's karma, not as revenge, but as realignment. Because when someone repeatedly rejects love, dismisses empathy, disrespects loyalty, the universe eventually removes those blessings from their life. And you, my friend, you were the blessing. They didn't just lose a person, they lost their last chance at something real, at something safe, at someone who meant every word, every gesture, every act of love. Now every glimpse of your progress stings. Every time they hear your name mentioned with admiration, every photo of you smiling without them, every success you post, every whisper of your gloppet triggers a quiet panic. They want to reach out, they want to apologize, but they can't, because now they know you're not the type who turns back. Not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself. More, that's emotional intelligence. That's spiritual maturity. That's the kind of power that doesn't scream it, just walks away and never returns. And the pain they feel now, it lingers longer than any punishment they ever feared. Not because you cursed them, but because life has a way of teaching harsh lessons when we refuse to learn gently. So don't look back. Don't wonder if they feel your absence. They do, they just won't admit it. Because to admit it would mean facing the most brutal truth of all. I lost the only person who ever truly wanted to see me win. And now they're forced to watch you win without them. That is a special kind of pain, one the ego cannot outrun, one no distraction, no new relationship, no empty validation can erase. That's karma at its quietest, most just and most devastatingly poetic form. You never raised your voice, you never humiliated them, you didn't post receipts, didn't start a smear campaign, you simply disappeared. And that silence was louder than any confrontation, because people who cause chaos expect chaos in return. They expect rage, retaliation, explosions. But when you chose peace instead of drama, that was your power, and it became their punishment. They were waiting for a fight. They were ready for war. But what they weren't prepared for was your stillness. Because to someone who feeds on control, your calm is confusing. Your silence is unsettling. Your growth is terrifying. You see, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop justifying your pain, when you stop reacting altogether, they're left in a room with the one thing they can't escape: themselves. You didn't need revenge. You needed distance. You needed focus. You needed yourself back. And now, they're watching you glow from the very shadow they once pushed you into. They won't say it out loud. Their pride won't allow it. But deep down, their ego knows the truth. You're becoming everything they never thought you'd become without them. And every step you take forward is a message they can't unhear. It's a permanent reminder. They no longer have access to the soul they once mishandled, to the love they took for granted. They scroll past your success quietly, their fingers hesitant, their breath caught. They ask mutual friends how you're doing, pretending not to care too much. They hover on your name just a second too long when it comes up, because deep down, they know you grew in the very silence they left you in. And that truth, it cuts deeper than any insult ever could. They expected your breakdown. They thought you'd spiral, unravel, beg to be understood. Instead, you became untouchable. Why? Because instead of chasing closure, you chased your calling. Instead of proving your worth to someone who denied it, you poured it into your purpose. You redirected the energy they tried to drain and built something indestructible: your growth. And now, you are aligned with something they can't even reach. Spiritual clarity, mental resilience, a mindset sharpened by pain, but not governed by it. You became the version of yourself they feared most, healed, focused, unbothered. That's what they truly can't forgive. Not the fact that you left, but the fact that you got better after they left. Because it confirms the most inconvenient truth of all. They were never the reason for your happiness to begin with. They were never the foundation. They were just the lesson. The storm that taught you how to build shelter so solid, nothing could shake you again. And now that you've risen, they can only do one thing: watch. But watching isn't healing. Watching is torment. Because with every peaceful photo you post, every goal you reach, every boundary you hold firm, they're reminded of what they lost. Your silence became your voice. Your progress became your response. Your calm, it became the storm. They completely misread you. They thought your kindness was desperation. Your patience was passivity. Your forgiveness meant you had no self-respect. But now, they see the truth. You weren't weak. You were wise. You weren't begging for love. You were choosing it consciously, intentionally. And once you stopped choosing them, they lost the power to define your worth. That is the loudest silence of all. A life lived well without them in it. You don't need to clap back. You don't need cryptic quotes or subtle shade. You don't need to reopen the past just to prove you survived it. Your existence is the proof. Your happiness is the justice. Your glow is the greatest closure. And here's the paradox they can't face. The more you rise, the more invisible you become to the ones who tried to keep you small. Not because you're hiding, but because they no longer belong in your light. They tried to dim you, but now your brightness is too much for their eyes. So let them pretend they don't care. Let them downplay your transformation. Let them talk about everything except the one thing that matters: their role in what they lost. But none of that changes the truth. Your rise isn't just your healing. It's your victory. and they feel it in the silence, in the absence, in the quiet sting every time your name comes up. Not because you're out for revenge, but because you are finally in alignment with the person you were always meant to become. See, they didn't just hurt you, they bet against you. They pushed you to your edge, hoping you would break. They gaslit you, ignored you, dismissed you, and waited for the collapse. And for a moment, maybe you did collapse. Maybe you stayed up at night wondering, was it my fault? Maybe you replayed every word, every text, every conversation, trying to figure out when you became too much. You apologized while you were the one bleeding. That's exactly what they wanted, not accountability but control. They didn't need your regret. They needed your self-doubt. Because as long as you doubted yourself, they were safe. They held the upper hand. They manipulated your reality. But here's what they never saw coming. Your awakening, the moment when everything changed. The sacred turning point when you stopped asking, why did they hurt me? And started asking, why did I let it continue? That was the beginning of their end. Because when your eyes opened, their power disappeared. And once your spine straightened, when your eyes opened and your spine straightened, their control collapsed. Not with a bang but with quiet inevitability. And the most powerful part of it all, you didn't rise in rage. You rose in clarity. Your emotional intelligence became your sword, your spiritual discipline, your armor, and the pain they once used to weaken you. It became your compass pointing directly to self-mastery. They tried to weaponize your kindness, tried to twist your empathy into a sign of weakness. They thought that if they pushed long enough, you'd break. But the truth is you were never fragile. You were just holding back the storm. And now they watch from the sidelines. Because you're not broken. You're bulletproof. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped waiting for them to give you the closure they never intended to provide. You stopped shrinking, stopped contorting yourself just to fit into the tiny comfort zone they had built for you. And in that silence, in that stillness, you became unstoppable. Let's be honest, it took everything you had not to collapse. You felt it in your chest, in your gut, in the tears you swallowed night after night. But you didn't collapse. You recalibrated. You took the shattered pieces, rearranged them, and evolved into someone new. You no longer needed them to validate your growth, because ironically, the very pain they caused became the foundation you rebuilt yourself on. They thought they broke you, but really, they just revealed you. And that's what they'll never understand. They didn't just lose someone who cared. They lost someone who would have gone to war for them. Someone who would have carried their burdens in silence. Someone who forgave them not once, not twice, but far too many times. Someone whose love was sacred, and they treated it like it was disposable. And now, you've outgrown them. Not with vengeance, but with vision. Every morning you wake up and choose peace over resentment. You prove them wrong without saying a word. Every smile you give without bitterness. Every step you take without looking back is you reclaiming your power. Each boundary you uphold, another brick in the fortress of your inner strength. Because now you understand. Some people weren't meant to stay and love you. They were meant to teach you just how deeply you must love and protect yourself. And that lesson, it was worth every scar. Now they're the ones stuck, trapped in the prison of their own consequences, while you're rising, you're building a life so full, so aligned, so untouchable, that they no longer even belong near it. You didn't just survive, you transcended. You made a decision that changed everything. I will not let this pain define me. I will become stronger because of it. And that is the most stoic move of all. Not to suppress the pain, not to ignore it, but to transform it into something powerful, something unbreakable. So if you ever find yourself wondering, do they think about what they did? Yes, they do, because nothing torments a manipulator more than the strength of the one they couldn't destroy. You became unshakable not because you were never hurt, but because you turned your hurt into wisdom. They never thought you'd leave. Not really. They assumed you'd always stay, always answer, always forgive, always return, because that's what you always did. You were dependable, predictable, reliable in your goodness. You handed out second chances like they were endless, and every time they crossed the line, you redrew it just a little further back, until one day you didn't. And that was the moment that broke them. Not when you screamed, not when you cried, not when you finally confronted them. No, it was when you went quiet, when you stepped back. No announcement, no drama, no explanation, just space, and in that space, you said the truth louder than any argument ever could. You didn't shout, you didn't curse them, you simply stepped back silently, powerfully, and that silence spoke a truth they were never ready to hear. I am no longer available for your chaos. That was your final act of strength, and they never saw it coming. They had prepared for everything else, for one last argument, for a pleading message, for an emotional explanation, but not for your absence, not for your peace. You see, in their mind, your closeness equaled control. Your continued presence was proof that they still had power. But your disappearance, that was the real declaration of power. And it was flawless. Because distance isn't just quiet. It's not just space. It's a boundary, a consequence. It's the lasting echo of a door you chose to close. Not in anger, but in emotional intelligence and self-respect. And that hits different. Because when you're truly gone, there's no one left to gaslight, no one to manipulate, no one to blame. All they have left is a mirror, and the reflection staring back at them unfiltered, undeniably is the truth they ran from all along. You were never the problem. They were dot in your distance. That's what finally forced them to see it. But here's the twist most people miss. You didn't create that distance to hurt them. You created it to save yourself. You chose survival. You chose spiritual discipline. You chose to stop betraying yourself for the comfort of someone who kept wounding your soul. And in that choice, you matured. You decided that disappointing them was better than continuing to abandon yourself. That's not cruelty. That's growth. That's self-mastery. Now your absence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. They scroll through your profile, but you're out of reach. They ask mutual friends about you, but no one has answers. They sit in silence, haunted by the memory of when you were just one message away. And here's the part that stings the most. You didn't leave to punish them. You left to heal, but the very act of healing, of reclaiming your peace, of choosing solitude over toxicity, became the punishment they never saw coming. Because when a good person walks away, it's not just a loss, it's a spiritual shift. It leaves behind a void that nothing else can fill, because they didn't lose someone average. They lost someone who genuinely cared, someone who would have carried their pain, who never wanted revenge, only respect. And now they must sit with the consequence of losing someone like that. That's not just regret, that's a reckoning. So don't second guess the distance you've created. Don't let their guilt-laced breadcrumbs tempt you back. Because your distance, it's not born from spite. It's born from wisdom. Your absence is a mirror, and what they see in that mirror now is their true self. Unmasked, unfiltered, utterly alone. Let them sit with it. Let them learn. Let karma do what karma does, because your role was never to carry their lessons. Your role was to learn yours and walk away, and you did. Now your life speaks for itself. Your calm is louder than any confrontation. Your joy is their quietest punishment, and your distance, it's a line they'll never cross again. They want you to look back, to watch them struggle, to see their pain, to applaud their regret. Because narcissistic minds don't just want control, they crave an audience. Even when they're drowning in consequences, they still want the spotlight. But here's the truth. Karma isn't a performance. It's not theater. It's not spectacle. It's law. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't care whether you're watching, because karma isn't about vengeance. It's about balance. And balance takes time. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. But when it arrives, it's undeniable. See, a narcissist expects two things from you: your reaction and your presence. But karma, it works best when you're gone. Because the moment you stop showing up, stop explaining, stop defending, stop caring, that's when the laws of natural justice take over. Not because you're bitter, but because you finally made space for life to do what you could never do, set things right. When you pulled back, you didn't leave behind a curse. You left behind a lesson, one that words could never teach, but your silence did. Let them learn what your voice never needed to say. Let time be the teacher that reminds them every action has a cost. Because narcissists don't truly understand consequences until they're left alone with them. They don't self-reflect while they're still receiving your empathy. They don't evolve while you're still rescuing them from their own collapse. But when the noise stops, when there's no one left to blame, when the world no longer plays by their rules, that's when karma whispers, not in fire, not in chaos, but in delays, in losses that can't be replaced, in relationships that never feel like yours did, in peace they can never buy back no matter the cost. And you don't need to be there, because that's no longer your work. Your work is healing, building, evolving, growing so far beyond their chaos that their consequences no longer touch your peace. The Stoics gave us a timeless root. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke. Marcus Aurelius. And what greater revocation is there than silence? What stronger form of detachment than indifference? Let them sit with their echo. Let them replay that last moment, the last time you looked into their eyes, calm, steady, finished. Let them realize too late what your presence truly meant. Let life show them the weight of losing a good heart. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to win the argument, because karma is not yours to deliver, and revenge, it's a thief. It robs you of the energy better spent on rebuilding your worth and chasing your future. You're now creating a life they can't access, a peace they'll never find, a purpose they'll never understand. That is your justice, not their downfall, your rise. Because the most poetic thing about karma is how silently it arrives, with receipts no one else sees, in moments no one else notices, a conversation that backfires, a connection that doesn't stick, an opportunity lost for reasons they'll never fully explain. And each time that sting hits, it's a quiet reminder This is what you lost. When you played with someone who only ever wanted you to win. So keep moving forward. Let karma work in silence. Let life restore balance on its own. You don't need to be the judge. You don't need to be the jury. You're already the proof that peace is the most powerful form of revenge, and that's something no narcissist can ever steal. Then comes that moment, brutal, shattering, when the truth finally sinks in. You're not waiting, you're not hurting, you're not looking back, you're gone, and not in a way they can fix, not with apologies, not with breadcrumbs, not with crocodile tears. That is the moment their unraveling begins. You see, they thought it was a game. They thought your silence was just another tactic. They believed you were bluffing, that eventually you'd come crawling back, craving their validation, longing for their attention. But you didn't. You started healing. You started glowing. You started thriving in a world where their chaos no longer existed. And that's when the panic sets in. Because nothing haunts a narcissist like being forgotten by the very person they assumed would never forget them. Now, they scroll quietly through your life, watching from the shadows, seeing a version of you they never imagined. Clear, peaceful, free. And the worst part, you no longer look like someone who misses them. That's not just rejection. That's psychological annihilation. Because narcissists survive on control. And if they can't control how you feel, if they can't emotionally pull you back, they no longer exist in your world. Let's make one thing crystal clear. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because for the first time in a long time, you started caring about yourself more. You saw the pattern, the loop, the emotional trap, being drained, disrespected, discarded, then sweet-talked just enough to come back, only for the cycle to repeat. But one day, clarity arrived. And when it did, it wasn't rage that set you free, it was resolve. A calm, grounded knowing that whispered, I deserve peace more than I deserve closure. That moment changed everything. You didn't need a dramatic exit. No screaming, no ultimatums. You simply stopped showing up to a war you never started. And that was the moment you won. Now they sit in silence, haunted by the ghost of everything they once had but never valued. They try to numb it. A new face here, a fake smile there, an online performance of happiness, but none of it lasts. Because deep down they know they lost something real. Someone who would have stayed forever if only they'd shown an ounce of honesty, effort, or love. But instead, they played games. They chose ego over empathy, control over connection, and now they're watching you rise into the person they never believed you could become, and it eats them alive. Because for the first time, they're the ones being left behind. You don't need to block them. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't owe them another word. Your silence is the closure. And here's the poetic truth. The day they realize you're never coming back is the day you finally return to yourself. No more giving pieces of your soul to people who treated it like a transaction. No more shrinking to fit inside a false peace. No more betraying your own intuition just to hold onto something that was never real. You reclaimed your worth. You rebuilt your spirit from the ashes. And now you walk in peace. Not because they gave it to you, but because you took it back. And that's the karmic thunder they never saw coming. Some people think karma is loud, that it comes with fireworks and dramatic collapse. But the truth is far more elegant. Karma doesn't need to scream. It whispers, your peace already did the damage. And your peace, the quiet, grounded, unstoppable energy, is what keeps them up at night. Let's tear down the illusion once and for all. They expected revenge. They expected rage. They were prepared for confrontation because that's how they operate. But what they never saw coming was indifference, was freedom, was you walking away, glowing, and never looking back. And that is the karmic punishment they can't recover from. Because here's the brutal truth. Nothing cuts deeper than watching someone you once had become someone you can no longer reach. You're not just moving on, you're elevating, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They thought they could break you, then walk away untouched. They thought you'd stay stuck in pain, searching for answers that never existed. But you didn't. You healed. You grew. And now every step you take in your new life is a mirror reflecting what they lost. A mirror they cannot shatter. A truth they cannot outrun. You're untouchable now. No more begging to be understood. No more explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. No more shrinking yourself for their comfort. You've reclaimed your energy. And that, more than any revenge, is justice. Let's be brutally honest here. They don't regret losing you because they genuinely miss you. They regret it because they lost access. Access to your love, your loyalty, your light. You were the safe harbor, the steady presence, the one who always came back, but not anymore. Now, the door is closed, and you're finally free. Let's be brutally honest. They don't regret losing you because they genuinely miss you. They regret it because they lost access to your love, your light, your unwavering loyalty. You were their safe harbor, the steady presence, the one who always returned, no matter how badly they treated you. But now, the door is closed, not slammed shut, just quietly, permanently closed. And the cruelest part, they can't force it open. Not with tears, not with empty apologies. They can feel it. That energetic shift, that invisible wall that says, you don't have power here anymore. That there is their karma. Because narcissists don't mourn people. They mourn control. They don't miss who you are. They miss what you gave. But you've stepped into a new life. One that doesn't revolve around being chosen by someone else. You've chosen yourself, and that is the loudest revenge of all. Let them sit with their guilt. Let them wear fake smiles while your peace speaks for itself. Let them scroll in silence while you thrive in reality. You don't owe updates. You don't owe explanations. You don't owe them a window into your world. You're not hiding. You're healing in plain sight. And the more you grow, the more your very existence becomes a quiet storm they can't escape. As the Stoics taught us, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Marcus Aurelius, you didn't match their pettiness. You didn't stoop to their level. You didn't fight fire with fire. Instead, you rose, not with noise, but with discipline. You mastered your emotions. You set psychological boundaries. You moved forward, not out of hate, but out of self-respect. And that trait, there is true emotional intelligence in doing so. You've sentenced them to the one thing they feared the most, irrelevance. Because, here's the hard truth, they didn't want closure. They didn't want peace. They wanted you emotionally entangled forever. But now, you're free. Every smile you wear, every dream you pursue, every ounce of peace you protect, that's karma in motion. You don't need to win in their eyes. You've already won, because you walked away with your soul intact. Let your peace be the punishment. Let your growth be the judgment. Let your silence echo louder than any screaming match ever could. And most importantly, let them learn the hard way. When you betray someone who only wanted to love you, you don't just lose a person, you lose a blessing. There will come a moment quiet, unexpected, when the truth finally hits them. Not in the middle of chaos, not during a fight, but in the stillness. Maybe when they scroll past a quote that reminds them of your strength. Maybe when someone new enters their life but lacks your depth. Or maybe it's just a random Tuesday morning and they wake up feeling empty. That's when it hits them. You're gone, not just physically, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually. You've unplugged from their chaos. You've disconnected from their game, and they can't reach you now. Not with words, not with apologies, not with manipulation. You're the one who got away, and they know it. They'll never find someone like you again. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. You were the one who stayed when things got hard, who forgave too often, who gave even when you were empty, who saw the good in them when no one else could. You were the safe space in their storm, and they burned it to the ground. So when the noise fades, when their ego quiets, when the distractions end, they'll sit in that silence and hear the soft, haunting truth. You had something rare and you destroyed it. This was never about revenge. It was always about becoming untouchable. It's not that you flaunted your success to hurt them. It's the silence that speaks louder than your presence ever did. A silence so powerful, it echoes through every corner of their regret. They're not haunted by what you did. They're haunted by what they lost. And here's the brutal truth. They didn't just lose you. They lost the best version of themselves, the one that existed when they were with you. The version that had potential. The version that was loved, trusted, protected. You were the mirror. You reflected who they could have been. But they shattered it out of fear, out of ego, out of pride. Now they sit among the fragments. Every fleeting connection they chase, every thrill they grasp is just an escape from the void you left behind. But nothing works, because no one else brings peace like you. No one else sees through them the way you did. No one else offers love. Without agenda, only you did that. And now, the regret. It's not cinematic. It's quiet and relentless. It's lying awake at night, wishing for just one more chance. It's replaying old messages, old photos, old laughter, hoping to reverse time. But you've moved too far to look back. You're too grounded, too clear, too aligned with your truth. You don't hate them. You've simply outgrown the version of you that tolerated their chaos. And that is what keeps them up at night. Not just because they lost you, but because they'll never have access to this new version of you. The version that's healing, that's thriving, that's free. You've become a chapter they can't reread, a door they can't knock on anymore, a story they no longer belong to, and no apology will ever unlock that door again. Here's what they'll never admit. They thought you'd wait. They thought you'd break. They thought you'd come crawling back. But you didn't. Now they lie to themselves just to get through the day. It didn't mean that much. They probably don't care anymore. They've already moved on. But deep down, they know the truth. It did mean that much. You did care, and they lost someone irreplaceable. You didn't need closure. You created distance. You didn't seek revenge. You chose peace. You're the one who walked away. And now, you're the one they can't stop remembering. So let them. Let them remember your kindness. Let them replay your laughter. Let them ache for what they destroyed. Because while your life moves forward, theirs remains stuck in the exact moment they let you go. They're not haunted by your presence. They're haunted by the echo of everything you used to be. And that echo, it never fades. They say the universe has its own rhythm, its own quiet justice. And you don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to prove your worth, your growth, your peace, your silence. That's the loudest truth there is, because at the end of the day, you were never weak for loving. You weren't foolish for believing in people who didn't deserve it. You were powerful because you gave love without conditions. You stayed kind when you had every reason not to. You remained true to yourself even when the world tried to break you, and now you've risen above it all. Let them burn in the fire they lit with their own hands. Let them sit in the silence you left behind. That's not cruelty. That's karmic law. That's spiritual discipline. That's emotional intelligence in motion. You don't need closure. You don't need to be understood. You just need to keep building your life with quiet confidence and unshakable clarity. Because the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's becoming untouchable, unbothered, at peace, so that the memory of you becomes their private regret, and your presence becomes a legacy they'll never be part of again. So keep going, keep evolving, keep shining. Your story is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning. And for those who used you, discarded you, underestimated you, they will never forget the day you walked away, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in power.